This month, and overall year, marks Final Fantasy VII's 20th anniversary. It originally debuted in Japan on January 31st, 1997 for the original PlayStation. It later released in North America in September and Europe in November. Whether or not it is the best in the franchise can be debated, but there's no denying the fan base behind it is arguably the most dedicated. Final Fantasy VII was a big shift for the series, creating something bold, more mature, and modern to be more inviting to players of all types. I've known friends, family members, classmates, and coworkers who were non-RPG fans that played this game upon release, and I'm sure a lot of you out there could share the same story. From the original 1997 PS1 release to all the ports in between, Final Fantasy VII is the best-selling title in the series with over 11 million units. At the time of its release, I was 10 and Final Fantasy VII was my first RPG. I loved games as a kid, but I never kept up on the latest news because I didn't buy gaming magazines. I had two sources in order to ascertain game releases: commercials and physically going to a store. Despite our modern technology, I still think that's how some people operate. Anyway, the point is RPGs were a foreign concept to me, but when I first saw the commercial of Final Fantasy VII after playing a SNES for 5 years or so, well, it blew me away and I just had to have it. Thankfully, my brother got a PlayStation in the game right around launch, but I'm not really exactly sure how, and yet that also doesn't really matter to the story. I didn't get to play much on weekdays, as he usually had friends over, which I should now mention he was 18 at the time, so there was a significant gap in our ages. On weekends, he slept in pretty late for partying hard, so I took advantage of this by creeping downstairs and playing Final Fantasy VII in the dark with low volume, sitting on the floor and craning my neck up to a 19-inch TV atop an old Coke shelf that had to be at least 6 feet tall. Despite these low standards, I was mesmerized and dedicated to the cause. Other than how I played, there are two other distinct memories I have with my first time through. First, I couldn't get past the Midgar Zolom. I trained and yet no level was good enough for me to beat it. When you exit Midgar onto the world map for the first time, the game automatically puts you in a top-down perspective, and I didn't know you could change angles. Somehow, even though I must have ran past it a dozen times, I missed the Chocobo Ranch until I accidentally hit the button to change angles when it magically popped up behind me. Needless to say, I was embarrassed, but I finally got a Chocobo and escaped that nightmare. The other memory involves returning to the Forgotten City with the ancient key. I was stuck for what had to be months. I really didn't know what to do after you got Buhugenhagen. This crisis was finally solved when I went to Toys R Us with my dad one day and found Final Fantasy VII's official guide. Even though I skimmed it in the store in order to learn what needed to be done, I bought it because I realized there was other content I missed, including Yuffie and Vincent. Also to note, that was my first strategy guide. Since then, I must have replayed it twice more on PS1, once when it came to PS3 and PSP as a PS1 classic, and once with this new PS4 port. Every time I played, I tried to get it as near complete as possible by maxing levels, materia, limit breaks, chocobo breeding, and so on. It usually took me about 70 to 80 hours before I was satisfied enough to tackle Sephiroth in the Northern Crater, and to then move on to a new game. Suffice it to say, I know Final Fantasy VII rather well, but I still learn with each new playthrough. My time with the PS4 edition is probably my most eye-opening experience, reflecting on whether or not the game has stood the test of time in 20 years. For those unaware, this PS4 version is a port from Steam, which is kind of a HD remaster of sorts. The character models, monsters, and overworld textures have all been smoothed over, which, despite their polygonal quirks, look pretty good. However, most indoor locations still use the pre-rendered backgrounds, which were not touched up, so they look blurry compared to the new models. It's kind of an awkward pop situation. The CG cutscenes were also left alone, but they still look pretty decent despite how far we've come in the medium. The biggest improvement featured is 3 optional modes you can turn on and off at will. You can increase the game's speed by 3, activate known counters, or enable regeneration on HP, MP, and your limit break meter. With these 3 components, I was able to finish the game in under 30 hours doing most side quests. It was, needless to say, my best run ever. The speed increase alone was the biggest help, as I found battles were a lot slower than I remembered, and that's not all I learned either. I made it a goal to switch out party members regularly to flesh out the story to give me new perspectives on how certain characters reacted to events that I may not have seen before. For example, in the fight against Genova after Aeris' death, I used Yuffie and Vincent. Afterward, Vincent kind of just nods his condolences to Cloud, which is whatever, but Yuffie surprised me. She actually started crying and hugged Cloud for a good beat. Coming from her, it was, again, surprising and just a little touching. On Aeris' death itself, well, it did nothing for me. I was admittedly shocked the first time, more so that I lost progress with a party member, but this time I was finally able to confront my indifference toward her. Everyone thinks that Aeris and Cloud should have been together, but this mentality is wrong or perhaps just misguided. First of all, Aeris comes on a little too strong toward Cloud, asking him to be her bodyguard and offering a date as a reward. I think the only reason she does this is because of her time with Zack, which upon his loss is trying to fill that hole, and Cloud kind of looks like him. The only time Cloud shows any sort of affection in the game is toward Tifa, when they reminisce about childhood and how he wanted to impress her in the town when he made it into Soldier. Tifa definitely loves him, but she also seems conflicted with Aeris' emotion, and because Cloud is acting differently, which we later realize is because Cloud has amnesia or something like that. And sure, he is upset when Aeris dies, but not specifically from love loss, but from the perspective of seeing a comrade killed and unable to prevent it from your greatest foe. Going back to what I just talked about, Cloud remembering Zack and that he was merely a guard and not in Soldier, but was still there to watch over Tifa anyway, and also be the one to actually finish off Sephiroth is one of the most climactic reveals in video games. Again, more so than witnessing Aeris' death, for me that is. That and later on when you have the option to remember how Zack was able to break Cloud and himself out of experimentation, and in the end die for Cloud. Just before making it to Midgar, cements my feelings over Aeris' abrupt loss. This is why I think Cloud and Tifa's relationship is more spectacular. Overall, there are actually no definitive lines of romance, but if you pay attention to the story, you can figure it out through dialogue, which adds to Final Fantasy VII's approach to its more mature content. Aeris rant out of the way, despite the more mature content, I noticed that there's some pretty wacky stuff in here as well. It begins with Cloud dressing up as a woman to impress a, let's be frank, pervert, to witnessing Hojo's son tanning on a beach in his full lab getup, surrounded by girls. On that same wacky note, the series is known now for minigames, but Final Fantasy VII is really where they exploded. There's the motorcycle chase, submarine expedition, chocobo racing, snowboard slope, boxing and gold saucer, the slap fight between Tifa and Scarlet, Priscilla's CPR, RTS battles at Full Condor, the Guard March in Junin, and so much more. Now some of those, like the CPR, may not be considered minigames, but more like gameplay novelties, but still, there's no denying how packed Final Fantasy VII is. The final piece I want to touch on is combat. It's very similar to Final Fantasy VI's Esper system, but magic is never learned on one particular person, and instead just increases the power via materia. The complexity in battle comes in mixing in and learning combinations like conjoining blue materia like all to fire in order to hit all monsters, or using cover with counter to increase opportunities of attack. Most of the game has no need for you to get experimental, but it's fun regardless. The one lackluster bit is the characters having no differing abilities except for limit breaks and weapons. Your party comes down to personal preference, which is fine, as again, this Final Fantasy was an effort to differ itself from the class-based systems before it, and I welcome the change. Despite some caveats, I actually think Final Fantasy VII still holds up rather well. This PS4 version is the way to go for players wanting to relive the experience, and for newcomers as well. The 3 cheats will make completion a cinch, which may go against the ethical code for certain gamers, but not for someone like me that has proven his efforts time and time again on this adventure. As I close this out, this is only the surface of Final Fantasy VII's retrospective. I will of course return by discussing the legacy of Final Fantasy VII with its many spin-offs and also fan legacy as well. Until then, I'll see you next time. Did you know that was a Reaction Examiner video? If you liked it, you should subscribe to me to keep up with everything that I'm doing. Also, if you have some other interests, like sex for example, check out Tomops, which is a comedy sex podcast thing wherein my best friend and I check out the weird and abnormal and the erotic. And of course, you should support me on Patreon because, hey, I want to make the channel better and I want your help to do so. Plus, if you want to check out my writing, check out Game Jerk, where I have archives and new stuff for all projects, okay? You can find all the stuff and more in the description with the links below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.